Steve dons red, white, and blue fatigues, a blue form-fitting helmet, and carries the newly colored shield on his back. Captain America and his men, including Bucky, travel throughout Europe, crushing Hydra's outposts one by one, with Rogers becoming fairly adept at utilizing the shield as a projectile weapon and learning that it can ricochet off numerous surfaces without losing any velocity. The Red Skull and Zola learn about his deeds. The Skull is enraged, referring to Rogers as a simpleton, with a shield, and murdering the last guy alive in one of his demolished sites. Steve and his guys are on a mission in the Alps to catch Zola on his personal train. Cap, Bucky, and Gabe Jones of the crew zipline across a large abyss and storm the train car by car. Cap and Bucky are soon surrounded by highly armed Hydra troops. Although they narrowly overcome the troops, Bucky is thrown off the train and falls into an ice river below. Zola has been arrested. Colonel Phillips pays Zola a visit in his jail cell and brings him a steak meal. Zola refuses the food, thinking that it is tainted. Phillips shrugs and consumes it. He informs Zola that he sent out a readily decipherable communication, which was undoubtedly intercepted by HYDRA, stating that Zola had defected. He also knows Zola is easy to deal with because he's the only HYDRA agent they've apprehended who hasn't swallowed his cyanide pill in order to avoid giving information, fearing that the deception may lead to his execution at the hands of the Red Skull. Zola caves into Phillips and informs him the location of the Red Skull's last surviving HYDRA outpost. Rogers mopes at a war-torn tavern. Carter arrives and consoles Steve on the death of his closest buddy. Steve finds that Dr. Erskine's serum rapidly regrows dead cells, rendering him incapable of getting inebriated. Rogers and his squad devise a strategy to eliminate Red Skull at his headquarters. Rogers mounts a Harley and assaults the base. Clad in a new uniform, he quickly avoids Hydra soldiers and tanks and arrives at the base. Surrounded by a Hydra force, he is apprehended and led to the Red Skull's private weapons lab. Red Skull wonders what makes Steve so unique. "Nothing, I'm just a kid from Brooklyn." Steve adds as members of his crew dash inside Red Skull's office. A massive combat erupts as hundreds of soldiers led by Phillips and Carter attack the facility, killing several Hydra soldiers. Red Skull runs to his own hangar, where a massive flying wing powered by the Tesseract is about to take flight. Steve tries to catch up to the jet on foot but fails. Phillips and Carter arrive in the Skull's roadster, and the three of them pursue the plane. Peggy stops Steve and kisses him just as he is ready to jump into the jet. Steve leaps from the roadster onto one of the big wheels of the jet. He climbs onto the ship and discovers hundreds of kamikaze planes/missiles, each tagged with a major American city. Soon after, Hydra troops enter the area, and Steve fights them, taking down multiple men and miniature planes. One of the planes, branded New York, is released. Steve chases it down, capturing it and crashing it back into the flying wing after tossing the pilot through its rearward-mounted propeller. Captain America and Red Skull are fighting inside the big cockpit. Red Skull fires his cube energy weapon at Steve, who deflects the rounds effortlessly with his shield. One of the shots gets deflected into one of the cockpit's center consoles, which houses the luminous blue cube. Skull pulls the cube into the air after the console is damaged. Suddenly, a doorway above him opens, revealing starry space. The Red Skull glows brilliantly and appears to be disintegrating. His ashes had been whisked up into the universe. The cube falls to the ground, still shining brilliantly, and burns its way down through the plane's hull before crashing into the water below. Steve controls the plane and communicates with Carter through radio. He informs her that the jet is on a route that will take them to the East Coast. He informs her that their dance would have to be postponed. He causes the plane to descend and crash onto the glacier below. Peggy is just hearing static. Steve awakens in a hospital from the 1940s. A vintage radio broadcasts the play-by-play of a Brooklyn Dodgers game. He stands up, looks out the windows, and waits for the hospital entrance to open. A young nurse who looks exactly like Peggy walks in. She waits for Steve to respond, who stares at her warily. He wonders why the radio is playing a game from May 1941. A game he knows he attended. She digs into her pocket and pulls out a two-way radio. Steve easily tosses two large soldiers in black uniforms through a wall as they approach the room. Steve walks through the hole and discovers that the hospital is actually a movie set. He dashes through the dim halls, pulls open a door, and finds himself in a contemporary building packed with business suits. He leaves the building and ends up at Times Square in 2011. He looks around, taken aback by his circumstances, and watches as a ring of similar black SUVs encircles him. Nick Fury comes and speaks closely to Steve. He informs him that he has been dormant in ice for the past 70 years, in a state of suspended animation. The hospital set was intended to gradually acquaint him with modern life. Still baffled, Steve takes a deep breath and informs Fury that he has a date, as he realizes that everyone else he knew in the 1940s is either deceased or extremely elderly today. Steve is at an old-fashioned gym in a post-credit sequence. He slams a punching bag so hard that it falls off its chain and flies across the room. Fury walks into the gym and asks Steve if he's been having difficulty sleeping. Steve sarcastically inquires whether Fury has arrived with another assignment. Fury responds affirmatively.